Hi friends, my name is Anna Helman, and in this video we are talking all about colors, how to add colors to your projects. We're talking about inks, markers, coloring tools, and blending tools as well. This video is a part of a series I'm making on getting started stamping. There's so much to know, so much to learn. Even if you're an experienced stamper, I imagine you will be able to learn some things in this video, so I hope you'll stick around and watch. At the end, we always talk about something related to life. Today, we're going to take a little trip to the barn and show you our 4-H animals, so I hope you'll stick around for the end. Let's get started. Let's start by talking about ink pads and different types of ink. If you get confused by all the inks on the market, you are not alone. So let's just talk pretty basically about a few different types of ink pads and inks. So we'll talk about the different types of ink first. So there's pigment inks, dye inks, there are permanent inks, there's several different alcohol inks, several different types of ink on the market. Now, the ink that I recommend you get started with and that most stampers prefer in most cases is dye ink. These are the inks that I use on a regular basis. Now, when I first started stamping, I didn't know what I was doing. I ordered some of the mini ink pads because I was working on a budget and I wanted lots of colors. So I opted for smaller pads to save some money. I ended up with pigment inks, and I was not happy with them because they take a lot longer to dry. They do have some advantages, but because the dye inks dry a lot quicker, they're just a lot more user-friendly. I do recommend using them. These are great for different techniques. You can watercolor with them if you want. You can do a lot of different techniques like I mentioned. So I do recommend them in general. Now, there are some other kinds that you may find you want to use in certain cases. StazOn is a permanent ink that you can even stamp on plastic, for example, or mugs or coasters, and this will stay permanent. So I do keep a little bit of StazOn in my collection in a few colors. Memento, the main time I use Memento is with my alcohol blending markers, and I'll show you these in a little bit. You can do some really amazing things with them. But anytime I'm using my alcohol markers, I make sure I use my Memento ink so that the ink doesn't bleed when I'm coloring. Let's talk about types of ink pads. So a lot of the ink pads on the market look like this. The ones you used as a kid when you were in preschool probably look like this. The lid pops off. And with this type of ink pad, you want to make sure you store them upside down. Why is that? Because you want to make sure when you open it, you're ready to use it, that ink is on the surface. So if you store it upside down, that will help that to be the case. Now, these are Stampin' Up! Ink pads. I love our ink pads, so I wanted to show them to you quickly, highlight a few of the features. But ours are all one piece, and this has advantages for one reason. If you drop it on the floor, the lids pop off of these at times. I've had this happen. Love that when I drop these, I don't have to worry about it popping open and ink getting on things. The way you open them is by lifting right here with your thumb. This rotates around and you can push it back. I love that it's all one piece. When you start crafting and you have a million things, a million places, you have like a mountain of stuff and you can't find your scissors, you can't find the lid to your marker. It's really nice that it's one piece and I only have to worry about one thing. I love that the color is marked everywhere. It's here, it's here. These come with labels on the bottom and these long strips to label the front and to label right here. So when you get several ink pads laying on your surface, even though you wouldn't think so, a lot of times it's really hard to tell the colors apart. So this really helps tell the colors apart. I love how big the inking area is. It's pretty large here. And these are actually a soft foam. And I love the way they ink my stamps. But I'll show you in a little bit how to ink stamps, because if you're not familiar with how to use these, you may end up with ink everywhere by pressing too hard, and nobody wants that to happen. So a little bit about the ink pads. There are mini ink pads as well. I mentioned when I got started stamping, I started with some similar to these because they come at a cost savings. You can get assortments in the mini ink pads, or you can even get uninked ones that are just plain white and use ink refill bottles to ink them in the colors that you want. When you have one of these and one of these, you can stamp for probably years and years before you'll run out of this color, unless you are using that color all the time for a ton of stamping. One of the other reasons I love these ink pads is because they're refillable. When you're purchasing things for your collection, it's great if you can be putting your money into things that are going to last for years and years. And with these ink pads, we offer colors so that you can refill them and do just that. Okay, let's talk about how to ink stamps. So I just mentioned that there are a few tips for how to ink your stamp. So I'm just going to set this stamp right here on the surface of that ink pad. Now, with other ink pads, you can press probably about as hard as you want, and it's not going to cause any problems. With these ink pads, if you press too hard, I'll show you what's going to happen. You're going to end up with ink all around the outside of that stamp. Can you see that? I'm going to clean this off real quick over here on my chamois. Okay, I have a clean stamp again. Now, if I just set it on there, I usually tap it a couple of times just to spread that ink out, make sure it's inked evenly. See how that ink is only on the raised image where I want it to be? That's what I want. So I don't press when I ink my stamp. So that is one tip for inking your stamp. Now, a couple of others. Let's say you're going to use the mini ink pads. My preference for how to ink stamps when I'm using mini ink pads is actually just like this. I lay the stamp upside down on my work surface and I ink it this way. Some people prefer to ink their stamps this way. And if you have a stamping platform, a lot of people actually prefer to use these little ones. And here's a fun tip in case I don't remember to mention this later. You can actually take a sponge dauber, we're going to talk about these later, and take the sponge off and glue this to the back side of here, and it makes a handy little tool to be able to ink these just by putting your finger in the back. So I hope that made sense. Now, let's talk about another way to ink stamps. Now, sometimes you may get into using large stamps, and these can be a little awkward to use, a little awkward to ink on your ink pad. So I just wanted to share tips, since we're talking about this, about inking up big stamps. So this is how, kind of like I just showed you with the mini ink pad, this is what I do on this one as well. Now this stamp is new and it looks like the ink is not going to cling to it all the way. It looks like I need to clean it. Usually I clean and use my stamps once first to get any residue from the manufacturing process off. But you'll get to see what it looks like here without actually cleaning it. So then you can pick up the stamp and stamp with it the normal way, or you can lay it on just like this. And I am going to put a piece of scrap paper over this and then press. And this is my foam pad. This is another thing when you are stamping. If you ever find that your stamps are not stamping quite right, maybe your work surface is not quite level, or for another reason it just won't stamp quite right, you can't figure out why, these are great. If you put this under your stamping, it really helps it to stamp better. So here you can see this gives you a few ideas on different ways to ink your stamps, because all stampers have different preferences, so it just gives you a few different ideas. Now let's talk about some coloring tools, and we're going to look at some markers and some pencils and one other similar tool that I absolutely love. So I have stamped some more images with this same, this is where the stamp came from that I used just a minute ago, and these as well. For right now, we will use these four. And for this first one, we're gonna look at some water-based markers. So these are my standard markers that I use in my collection. You may see them behind me when I start my videos. I store them with my ink pads. And anytime I am stamping or working with these, I want to use the StazOn ink if I don't want it to bleed. Okay, these are water-based. If I don't want it to bleed, use the StazOn ink. But sometimes I'll mention, let's say I'm coloring with purple. I might even stamp with the purple and allow that color to bleed some for a fun effect. So I thought we'll do a little bit of coloring with each of these coloring tools so you can see the differences. So I am using Fresh Freesia with, we're going to do all of these in similar colors. So this is my Fresh Freesia marker. It does have two ends. We have a bullet end and a brush tip, which I love. A lot of times when if I stamp something and it doesn't stamp quite right, like I missed part of it, I'll come in with this bullet tip and fill it in by hand to rescue it so that I don't have to start over and stamp again. Now I am going to do this very, very casually, very carefree coloring here, just to save a little bit of time, and also to show you that casual coloring can look nice as well. The color I'm using for the leaves on these will be Granny Apple Green. And I'll show you with some of the others, we're gonna do a little bit more shading. I'll show you what it looks like with these markers if I do wanna come in with some other colors and add a little bit of shading, because we will get a different effect with this than we will with these other tools. So we're doing this carefree. You can spend as much time coloring as you want to with these tools. I love that so many people enjoy coloring and the therapeutic effect you get from it, that it's just relaxing. So I'm just going to draw a line down the center with this darker. This is an Old Olive marker. And here is Petunia Pop. We'll just add some highlights around some of these lines. If you ever want to add shading and you don't know where to add it, look at the lines on your stamp. A lot of times it's going to give you an idea of where that shading should be just by where those lines are. Okay, so there is one that I colored just with the water-based markers, the standard markers. Now let's look at the alcohol blending markers, and these are my absolute favorites because you can blend with them. That's in the name, the blends markers. So we are going to start, when you purchase these blends markers, they come in sets of two, so you get a lighter one and a darker one. So just by purchasing one set, you can start blending right away. So my favorite way to blend is to go in and color whatever area I'm coloring. I like to color with my lighter color first. So I'm going to color this whole peony flower with the lighter Fresh Freesia marker. Now I'll come in and add, we'll go around the bottoms of the petals. We'll try it that way. Add some of this darker one. And for fun, now this is already blending together on its own without me doing much. I'll add a little bit up in here. And now, sometimes I would come back in with my lighter one and blend those together, but let's add in a third one and then I'll do my blending. So we'll add in a little bit of this down here at the base. And now let's bring in my lightest one again. And there's a lot of different techniques for blending. So you can just color over the whole area again. A lot of people like to use a circular motion like this. My favorite is actually what I call feathering, where you start in the dark area and you just drag that color towards the lighter area. But what I find when I get my best shading is start with that light color like I showed you, add any darker color that you want to, whether it's one darker color or more than one, and then come back with that light and go over that entire area again. If you don't go over the entire area, what you'll find is you'll end up with dry, basically lines where one area dried and the other area didn't, and you don't want that. So as this sits for a few minutes, those colors will blend together some more. Let's do this with the leaves. We'll go a little quicker on the leaves. I'll just fill these in with the light color and then add the darker color, and what you'll notice is they will blend together some without me even coming back in and adding the lighter again. So if blending intimidates you, hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully I'm showing you how simple it can be. But if it does, I encourage you to just see, do you see how pretty these colors are? Even if we didn't do any of that blending, I just love how bright and rich these colors are. So these markers are great whether you are interested in actually doing the blending or not. Now let's look at a third coloring tool. These are watercolor pencils. So these are very similar to just colored pencils. You can use them exactly like colored pencils, but they have an added feature which is really fun. You can do watercoloring techniques in lots of different ways. So let's color with these quickly. The way I like to color with my pencils is to keep a flat edge. That's how I find I get less lines from the pencils, is if I use that flat edge and try to do a swirling motion like you see here. I'm doing pretty well right now, not getting harsh pencil lines. So we'll color that in. Now I didn't have the Petunia Pop color, that darker color, but what I do have, this is another one, a gorgeous grape. So I'll come in with a little bit of this around the edges, kind of like I did on these others. So we could leave it like that. I'm not really blending this very well because I know what I'm going to do next. I'll show you here in just a second. Let's do the leaves quickly. So you can do watercolor techniques. You can add water to these pencils and do fun things with them. I love watercoloring techniques. I will have quite a few videos you can look up. You can search just for my, anytime you're looking for a certain video, I would encourage you to search for my name and the technique or whatever you're trying to learn, because I have tons of videos out there. So we'll add in some of this old olive here. So like I said, you can try watercoloring with them, or here's something else that's really fun you can try. This is called a blender pen, and you can come in with this and just go over it lightly. And can you see the difference between this leaf and all of these others that I have not gone over? It just blends it together. You don't, if I had pencil lines, which I did, you don't see them anymore. There we're added that darker color in. I can help that blend some. And it just smooths everything out. So when you want to switch colors, before I move to my purple, I'm just going to color a little bit here on my scrap paper. Now let's come in and do the flower. And this is why I wasn't trying very hard when I added that darker purple in, because I knew I was going to come in with this and all of those pencil lines were not going to show. So then I'll go over up here quickly. And now you can see the effect of the watercolor pencils. So last but not least, we are going to use another one of my favorite coloring tools. This has been one of my favorites for years and years. And these are water painters. They're basically a water brush. So it's kind of like using a paintbrush with some water, except the water is already in the barrel of it, which makes it really easy to do some really cool techniques because the water is already there for you and it kind of contains the mess. So what I want here is I'm trying to stay consistent with my colors. So I have my Fresh Freesia ink pad and my Granny Apple Green. And you can pick up ink several different ways, but this is a way I like to do it, where I press my ink pad onto the surface. And now I can use this to pick up my colors. So I'm going to squeeze this until I get a little bit of water dripping out onto that block. And now I have some water there and I'm going to mix it. So you can play around with this. You can mix lighter colors. You can mix it darker. If you start and you're like, oh, that's too light, well then come back in and pull in some more of that ink. You can always go darker. It's not always easier to go lighter, but you can always go darker if you want to. So again, I'm doing this very casually. One of the things I love about this water painter is it's supposed to be casual. When you go outside of the lines, that's kind of the way watercolor is, right? So then same thing as I did with the blender pen, I want to scribble on some scrap paper until I don't see any more of that color coming out. And then we can switch to the other color. So I'll blend this up some. And just lightly go over this. One thing I like to do with the water brush is after I've done my coloring, come back in and pick up either some solid ink or just some of the darker area that I have mixed with water. But get some more concentrated ink one way or the other and then add your shading that way. So this, in my opinion, is the most carefree of the ways. You can go outside of the lines and it still looks really nice. But just a comparison of how it looks for the regular water-based markers, the blends, alcohol blending markers, the watercolor pencils with the blender pen, and then here with the water brush doing a little bit of watercoloring. I will mention for this one again, I used my StazOn ink to make sure that that black flower that I stamped didn't bleed. I have two more coloring tools to share with you. These will go quickly, so I hope you are learning some things that can help you with your stamping. So I stamped these same flowers, but this time I did it with my crumb cake ink, my dye inks. So these will fade, these will bleed if I apply water to them, but I do like to use different colors sometimes and wanted to show you what this would look like with these other tools. So here are two blending tools. I have the sponge daubers that I mentioned earlier, and I also have some blending brushes. So here are my blending brushes and their storage. I have smaller ones and larger ones, which are nice. And I think I'll get out my smaller green one because I'm gonna apply some ink to these flowers. So let's do this first with the daubers. But I just wanted to share with you a lot of different ideas. There's so many products out there. And even once you have the products, sometimes you may not always know how to use them. And there's lots of different ways to use products. So hopefully this helps you get a little bit more familiar with some of these products. Now, sponge daubers, there are different ways to apply ink to your project. So right now I'm doing more of a dabbing technique where I'm getting a little bit of stippling. Now I can rub back and forth and get a little bit different effect. So I'll hold that up so you can take a look at those. Now we'll apply a little bit to the flower. I like the dabbing effect, but I do also like when it's more blended together. So there you can see how the sponge daubers look. Now let's do one of these with the blending brushes. So when I use blending brushes, I do typically want to have some scrap paper handy, because I pick up the ink like this with a swirling motion, and then if you go straight to your project, a lot of times you'll end up with dark spots where there's excess ink coming off onto your project. So I like to get that excess ink off onto my scrap paper and then move on to my project. So again, with this, starting lighter than you want is better than starting darker than you want. If you start and it's not dark enough, you can pick up some more ink, or you can just apply more pressure. Now let's pick up some of the freesia. Again, I'm gonna blot a little bit over here on my scrap paper and apply that to the flower. Now you can use these in a lot of other ways as well. A lot of times I'll use them to apply ink to the outside of a project and just make kind of a pretty glow around the outside. We can just apply a little bit here on the corners for a fun effect. But here you can see the effect with the blending brushes and the sponge daubers. So what do you think? That was a lot about inks and colors and markers and how to ink your stamp, all kinds of things that I hope can help you in your crafting. Thanks for being here, friends. We're gonna take a quick little trip to the barn, and I hope you'll enjoy this. So here we are at the barn. I thought you might enjoy a little barn tour. Up until a couple years ago, we didn't really have any animals, but our kids have gotten involved in 4-H, which is a youth program where kids can show animals at the fair and do lots and lots of other things. I may talk about that here in a little bit. We'll see how this goes. But our kids have gotten really involved in this, and this year we have quite a few more animals than we have had before. So I thought you might enjoy seeing them. So I just got done bottle feeding. There's the bottle. This is Leo. These animals actually have middle names also. I don't remember them, but the kids aren't around, which is why I'm on barn duty right now. And I cannot tell you the middle names. I cannot remember what I did 5 minutes ago, let alone all of these animals' middle names. But I just got done bottle feeding Leo, and sometimes he goes crazy after he's done because he thinks he needs more than that. He gets that much. I think that's a half a gallon. Gets that twice a day. And he gets done and he just goes crazy. You can see his slobber all over the fence right here. You know my favorite thing about baby, oh my goodness, he's performing for you. And when they want more and are just looking for something to suck on, sometimes they suck on the gate like that. This is my absolute favorite thing about baby calves. Oh, he's too smart. He's like, I know I'm not gonna get milk out of that. It is just like the most endearing thing on the planet, in my opinion. So cute. Now this is Ollie. I don't want to leave Ollie out. Ollie is short for Oliver. Both of these are red Holsteins. So these are, okay, so let's talk about dairy farms for a minute. Dairy farms only have a use for keeping female animals because when they grow up, they can have babies and then they produce milk. So all the little male animals don't really have a use on the dairy farm. So these are dairy calves that are male. They get castrated and then they will grow and be produced for meat. So they are being used for beef, even though they're dairy breeds. So yeah, we got them from the dairy farm when they were just a couple of days old, and we bottle feed them for a month or a little longer, and then they get moved up and we feed them grain and hay. So this bigger one, he's Ollie. The little one is probably about 3 weeks old. The bigger one is, I think, about 2 months old now, and they are just super sweet. We love them to death. Hey, Ollie, say hi to the camera. Can you see Ollie's crazy eyebrows? They are crazy. They're big and crazy. But all animals, you, I'm sure, know this from your pets. If you have pets, they all have their own personality. They're fun. So we have some new kittens. Can you see one of the kittens out here? And our dogs are performing here at the moment, wanting to get to the kittens, and they cannot. So we just got the pigs today. They are brand new. I don't think they have names. I think the one got pre-named, but yes, our youngest is not here for me to ask her, but she pre-named the one pig. So we have 2 pigs. The red one is a Duroc, and this other one is a Berkshire, I believe. Those are the breeds they are. And okay, there's Lucy, our one dog. We have some goats out here. We're still trying to figure out our setup. We just put all these fences up and everything since the animals are new. We have lots of things to clean up here in the background. But we have 3 goats. There's which one is over there? The little one is over here. The little brown one. Here's the bigger brown one. This is Sunny, short for sunflower. I am not sure if the white one has a name. The small one is Kip. I like to call the small one Kipper. But goats are lots of fun, totally entertaining. But kids will show all these animals at the fair in July. It's lots of work. They have to be fed twice a day, and to train an animal to show it at the fair takes a lot of work. The larger the animal, the more work it takes. But these animals, the brown goats are dairy goats. The white one is a meat breed. So any of the dairy breeds for cattle and goats, they're easier to train because they're more docile. So they don't take quite as much work to make sure your animal doesn't run and get away from you at the fair, because that happens at times when animals go a little crazy. But just thought we would say hello to the animals. I was hoping we could see both of the kitties. You can see one of them here. Sorry, we're losing focus. But that one, the black kitty right here, is Boba. We brought the kitties over here because we have a mouse problem, because it's a barn and that happens. And Boba is a little kitty. We are shocked. Boba is a good mouser already in her little tiny state. So anyway, that's what's happening at the barn. Thanks for being here today, friends. I hope you have a blessed day, and I hope you'll be back again next time when I'll be here helping you to hand make with love.